Hello, and welcome to the weekly introduction for Chapter 4. We're also going to be covering part of Powerful Interactions today. But I'm only going to be doing the weekly introduction for Chapter 4. All right, so quote of the day: play is the only way the highest intelligence of humankind can unfold. So if we think about that, we definitely need you hear some of the highest, some of the animal kingdom, some animals out there, some chimpanzees, gorillas, some dolphins and such that might have a little bit of play in their day or whatnot. But when we're talking about young children and humans, in other words, in order to get the most intelligence, is what we need to do is we need to have play in our lives. And especially, of course, as we know, for young children, play is the way they learn. So again, the highest form of intelligence through play. All right, clicker questions. So see if you can get this. I'm going to pause a little bit after each one to see if you can get this before we move on, before I give you the answer. Blank the physical space to be sure everyone is there and safe. So observing, scanning, reading, or viewing. What are we going to be doing with the physical space? So hopefully you got the right answer. Let's see if you did. And scanning the physical space. That's what we need to be doing. We're going to be talking about observation here in Chapter 4 and observing and so forth, but we should always be scanning to make sure everyone is there and safe. Observing takes a little bit more of your brain power for that. So when we're talking about children being just making sure that we have everybody present and safe, we are doing more scanning. The book discusses 4 types of observation. Which one is not included as one of these? So narratives, event sampling, frequency count, or behavior sampling. So one of these 4 types of observation, which one is not included in the book for Chapter 4? All right, let's see how you did. And C, frequency count is not in the chapter, even though many, if not most, if not all of you have taken Child Development 105. We all know that frequency count in that class, or probably taken another observation class, maybe at another college, the frequency count is an uh, extremely important method of observing, but in Chapter 4 it is not discussed. And lastly, evaluations can label unfairly or prematurely the very people who they are intended. So is that true or false? Evaluations can label unfairly or prematurely the very people for who they are intended. And hopefully this one was pretty straightforward with you. Yes, true, of course, because we don't, if we evaluate someone and we give them a label and we don't have enough evidence, we don't have enough information, of course, that can be something that we're unfairly doing or prematurely doing. All right, and hopefully you had some successes and possibly some struggles, hopefully not too many struggles this week in your lab time. Now, as I go through, I'm going to be changing over to the other PowerPoint, so you'll see a little bit of transition here. All right, and we are going to continue, and we're going to start here with Chapter 4. Observing and assessing young children. And I am doing this audio taping at home with my squeaky chair. Sorry about that. So you might hear some clicks and pops and such. And then for some reason, my family happens to be in other parts of the house tonight and doing a lot of cleaning and work. I don't know what they're doing out there. All right, let me get a drink of water. All right, Chapter 4, Observing and Assessing Children. Since again, many of you, which we just briefly mentioned, many of you have probably already had Child Development 105. Some of you might have taken it a while ago. Some of you might have taken it just the previous semester before you took this class. Others of you might have taken it in another college. So I'm going to go rather fast through this chapter because I know for most of you it is review. All right, why do we observe? Oh my gosh. Observational skills are very important to being a good teacher. When you watch children and record what you see, when you watch children and record, you see what they need, then provide the environment and the tools they need to learn. So we have to be observing each and every day to see what the child is at, so we know the environment, make sure that the child is learning. The difference between scanning and observing, I briefly mentioned this. Scanning the physical space is what we're doing to basically make sure that everyone is safe. Doing those head counts. As we know with community care licensing, they talk about, the name. We should be writing names down on something, and to make sure that we can do head counts. So in addition to, of course, our sign-in sheets and everything, I know our teachers at the lab school do a whiteboard. They usually have a whiteboard. We found that whiteboards work out really well because once a child leaves the space, leaves the classroom and so forth, they get picked up for the day, we can easily remove their name from that whiteboard, and we're constantly updating it to make sure we know exactly the number of children we have, and therefore we can say, okay, I know right now I have 9 children, or I have 15 children, or whatever it might be. I can scan the space, I can do a quick head count, do I have all 15? And then I can also, of course, before I'm going inside, before any of those transitions, inside to outside or outside to inside, I want to make sure that I'm also matching a face and a name on the board. So what the name is on the board to the face there in the classroom. Observing, of course, requires that closer inspection, focusing your attention instead of just scanning. So like I said, it takes more brain power to observe versus scanning. So it's kind of like that whole, listening and hearing. So we can, listening's kind of like the scanning. So we're listening and scanning at the same time. But when we're observing, we really, we're observing, we're looking at it closely, and then we're also hearing what's going on. So we're not just listening, we're hearing. It's making more of an impact in our brain in order for us to hopefully record what it is that we're observing. Tools for recording. What tools do you need for recording? It's not too much, right? A notepad, pencil, collecting pictures and examples of work. Some of you might have seen that our teachers at the lab school use mini pads for at the bottom of the 15. They are connecting that the work and everything, adding some observations to it, some anecdotals and so forth, and creating an actual document and an assessment for a child. What are the types of observational tools? Anecdotal records, checklists, and event samplings. Those are probably going to be our best. Rating record is also part of the DRDP 2015. So anecdotals are our go-to, as we've talked about, not only in Child Development 105, but in other classes you're doing anecdotals, similar to what you're doing for your individual lesson plan assignments that you're doing each and every week. Checklist. So we know that if we were trying to observe several children doing the same thing, how many children can hop, how many children can jump, how many children can skip, what's the quality of their running, something like that might be something that we're observing. So using a checklist for that. And then event sampling is a really good one, as you know. Hopefully we can recall that. For instance, event sampling is a good thing to use if a child's having separation anxiety. So, each morning I'm gonna quickly document, maybe how long they were upset for, or how long they cried for, that kind of thing. So combining that with of course usually a quick anecdotal is a really powerful tool. And then any questions about the DRDP 2015, if we're doing this lecture in class, then of course if we have any, make sure that you are doing your weekly anecdotals, so 2 per week. Make sure that you're following your assignment sheet for the DRDP. If you have any questions, if you're not familiar with anecdotals or anything like that, that might be a time in which you need to come and meet me in my office for some office hours to make sure that you understand everything. Or of course, ask in class. Interpretation. So we interpret everything that we see and take in our senses. So everything about the world in which we live, we are interpreting things. So everything from, I wonder if that person in front of me in the car in front of me is going to stop or not. Or like I know today I was on my way home, there was somebody who I could see out of my rearview mirror, and I'm like, you know what? I bet they're gonna cut. I bet they're gonna cut right over between me and the other car, and I bet they're gonna cut, in and out. They're gonna swerve in and out, and I'm on the 78, and traffic was pretty heavy. We were probably at maybe 40, 45 miles an hour. I mean, we weren't up to 65 miles an hour or anything, but we were going at a good clip. But of course, traffic was heavy because we had been stopped before that. So I was looking at the person in my rearview mirror. I could just tell by the way they were driving. I could just interpret that and go, I bet they're going to cut. They're going to do that whole thing. They're going to cut in between. I was in the middle lane, so they cut over from the fast lane right in front of me and the car in the fast lane behind them, and cut over, so they were in my middle lane for just a brief period of time before they cut back over in front of the other car and continued on. And then, of course, as I was watching them down the road, they did that several more times before I didn't see them anymore because they were traveling at a rather high rate of speed. So we interpret everything that we see with our senses. So I was using my eyes with that one. I was using my, what I saw on the road with that one. I didn't hear them coming up or anything like that. I didn't feel them or touch them, thank goodness. Thank goodness they didn't cause any accidents or anything like that. But I was interpreting by what I was seeing. So when we are interpreting what we see in the classroom, we want to make sure that we recognize our own biases. We want to make sure that, we're not playing favorites with a child. We know, this is something I talk about, that everybody has favorites in their classroom. If you don't have a favorite, you're lying to yourself, because everybody has favorites. So recognize your bias. Is that a child that I really really think is, just so adorable, and oh my gosh, the things that they say, the things that they do. Or is it the child that, oh my gosh, they just, it's really, really difficult for me to be around that child, in the sense of, having to work with that child might be very difficult to work around that child. Maybe lots of behavior issues and so forth. So recognize our own bias. We want to make sure that we're familiar with the tool. So which tool is going to be the best one for me to observe, and then I'm going to interpret based on my observations. Decide what you're going to look at for the DRDP 2015 areas. So for instance, we want to make sure that, the different areas within that, some of them are crossed off. We're doing kind of a modified version for the Child Development 201 class. So we're not necessarily looking at every single area. And then remember, you're not necessarily going to have every single anecdotal for each area. But remember also, many anecdotals can fall into more than one area, okay, more than one measure, should I say, because remember the DRDPs are broken up into measures. So decide what you're looking for. Oh yeah, there's a really good one on physical development. Or oh my gosh, look at that child, my child that I decided to pick and observe for the semester. Oh my gosh, look at them. They are really doing a great job with, sharing, interacting. Maybe it's a dramatic play. Maybe they're writing their name for the first time. All of those different things. So know what we're going to be looking for. And then assessment is the process of gathering information about children from several forms of evidence and organizing and interpreting the information. So we do that through DRDPs, and that's probably the most familiar one to everybody because it's the one that's the most used here in the state of California, most widely used, should I say, especially in our state funded and state preschool programs. So we need to, I'm sorry, I just yawned. Sorry. um, I might yawn a couple more times, sorry. Anyway, so we want to make sure that as we're gathering this information, we get it from many different areas. Like I said before, pictures, like if you only take pictures of the child's development, you're not going to get, if you don't have anything written down, you don't have any anecdotals, it's not going to be good evidence. It's not going to be enough there in order for you to actually interpret the information. So we want a little bit of everything. So work samples, pictures, lots of anecdotals, checklists, event samplings, different things like that, in order for us to organize and interpret the information. Now remember, we also might be doing an assessment, maybe it's not for something as formally as a DRDP 2015. We might also be doing it for, usually we do observations, and then we've got that for parent-teacher conferences, but sometimes, if we have a child who's displaying some really significant behaviors, I'm going to say probably more on the aggressive side, that we might be calling a parent-teacher conference much earlier than the time in which we actually have a full-on assessment of all of their areas of development. So we might be just assessing their behavior management, their ability to why can't I think of the word? It slipped my mind. Their nuts. Anyway, their ability to control themselves from within, and I cannot, for some reason, that word has just slipped my mind tonight. So, but you guys know what I'm talking about. So when we have to do those parent-teacher conferences, we want to make sure that we do have lots of evidence in different ways, and possibly also from different teachers. So it's not just from me, it's also from others that are seeing the same types of behaviors from the child. So then we can come to the parent and say, look, we've got this information, we've got this evidence. So the way I'm interpreting it is, you know, to, a school development in order to an assessment. So those kinds of things that we're looking for. All right, the top 10 characteristics of quality child assessment. So these are the things you want to make sure you have in an ongoing. So that's one thing I always try to reiterate, even though we might have that behavioral assessment, there's always so many things, so many more positive things about the child. Um, you know, uh, and we might find it in very little ways, like, oh, maybe they're really interested in insects or something like that. But every time you go out in the playground and they find an insect, they're just so excited about it. So we can see that, oh my gosh, this child is getting an amazing, having an amazing experience with this. So it's not what's wrong with the child, it's all those things that are right. So we want to make sure that, even though we might have some behavioral issues with a child, okay, but there's always some things that are just amazing. Looking on that positive side. So, and that's the way we should always approach parents, especially for coming into the conference. So what about the child is just amazing, and then slowly bring up those things that we might be more concerned about. Must be authentic, so no testing, no, no, what number is this, what color is this, anything along those lines that would be not authentic. So just a straight testing situation, generally speaking, with maybe somebody who's a stranger or something like that. So we would not want anything along those lines. Based on what you see, not what you think you should observe or what you think the child should be doing. Meaningful artifacts and work samples. So we talked about work samples. Meaningful artifacts would be some of those other things like pictures of the child, building the huge block structure, building a boat out of blocks, or whatever it might be. I know I was in the classroom not too long ago, and the children were talking about, going to Hawaii, and I think somebody in the classroom had come back from Hawaii, so it was a very, very important block structure that they were creating at that time, based on multiple measures. So not just one observation or situation. So every child, almost every child's going to get aggressive at some point in time. So almost every single child is going to push or hit or do something like that. Even though, again, we don't want to. We want to definitely prevent those things from happening as much as we possibly can. But just because a child hit once or something like that, or just because they had separation anxiety once, doesn't mean that they're going down a road of having a lot more struggles. Number 6, there we go. Based on the facts, only the facts, just the facts, only the facts, nothing but the facts. What you see and not your interpretation. So remember those words like it seems, I think, I feel. We want to keep those out of the child assessment. Those would be more based on our interpretations. So we only want the facts for the actual observations. Confidential, as no matter what, always confidential. So the teacher most likely might have to discuss things maybe with a site supervisor or a director. Of course, those people are going to keep things confidential as well. So every single staff member is bound by confidentiality at whatever site they work at. Now, some centers do a better job with confidentiality than others, so make sure that you're aware of that. And if you hear someone who's breaking some like you're a teacher in another classroom, and a teacher starts talking about something that's really specific about child, you might be saying, hey, I don't want to hear who it is or something like that. Or I have a child who's displaying this behavior. That would be a better way to approach it versus a specific child named. Must include your interpretations after the observations. So always interpretations are separate from the actual observation. As we know, that's the way we structured everything in Child Development 105, and hopefully in any other observation classes that you might have taken if you didn't take 105 with us. Based on center learning standards, so whatever center you're based at, what are the learning standards, and hopefully it's not an academic-based program. And finally, needs to raise relevant issues that require action. So if we do have something, if the child, for instance, maybe it's their motor skills, maybe they're not able to grasp a fork, or maybe fork or spoon, maybe they're not able to grasp a marker or crayon. So that might be something that this was something that we've observed. If we're talking about the toddlers, we might be some of the first to see that, but most likely the parent is going to see that, earlier on as well. But remember, some parents don't realize that with toddler, that, a child by 18 months should be doing this. Some of them, especially the first child, and no interaction with other children, might not raise a concern or a red flag for a parent, but as a teacher, it might definitely raise a red flag for you. Okay, assessing children with disabilities. remember that I've talked about, my son, especially with speech, and uh, his birthday is in November, and he turned 3 in November. And I remember going down, and I think I had already made the appointment for the speech to get him an assessment for speech with the school district. I called and made the appointment as soon as I possibly could after his 3rd birthday. I want to say we got in like a week or two after his 3rd birthday, and they did an assessment. And then by the time we got the information back from the assessment, it was almost that Christmas break time. So he started speech therapy, and he did that for a year and a half, 2 days a week. So all the school days that, the school was in session, we took him over to Juniper Elementary School. My husband had Mondays, I had Wednesdays, and we did that before, from the time he was 3 until the time he was like 4.5. And luckily, he graduated the program, and just it was amazing because now, oh my gosh, we could understand him. So we want to get that, but if he hadn't spent a year and a half in it from the time he was 3 to 4.5, what would that have looked like later on? And I remember, some of the children, like in his 1st and 2nd grade classes at school, at elementary school, and going, oh my gosh, that child could really use some speech, some kind of slurring of letters, children with more lisps, stuttering issues, and so forth. And if they would have gotten into the system, much sooner, then they would have, they probably would not have had any of those, any of those speech or language articulation issues. Um, 0 to 3, we have Hope Infant. So, and that's run through the County Office of Education here in San Diego County. So if we do have a child who is 0 to 3, we can get him in that way. Luckily, my son just started talking when he was like 2.5 or so, a little after 2. And that was a time when we were like, we can't understand a word he's saying. But I knew we could get him in at 3 into the school district, so we just waited for that time. And then 3 to 21, of course, is the school district. So just an example. I'm sure some of you have your own examples with your own children or children that have been in your care. But I like to give the speech one because that's going to be the thing that you're can't hear you, or whatever it might be, or I can't understand. And you're trying to get them to repeat it, and maybe you're trying to get interpretation from a parent and so forth. If you're trying to do those things, that's a child who probably needs some speech and language, at least an assessment from the school district. So then hopefully can actually can actually receive services. And remember, those services are free within the school district. I've known of other children who do speech and language through something like through insurance company. A couple of children that the go through Kaiser to go work that they are able to, their child to. So that's what the insurance company would pay for that if you had that type of insurance. And of course, remember, parents have the final say. I like to give the example of one little girl. Her name was Jolene, and this was years and years and years ago. And she started off with us at the lab school when she was about 18 months old. And the teacher had some major concerns with not only her speech, but also her gait, her walking ability. And we tried So let's see here. So since that other one ended rather suddenly, chapter 4 again, pretty much a review. So you should have that ability, or you have that ability, that knowledge and skills when it comes to observation. Okay. All right. So powerful interactions, and we're on pages 135 to 147. So it's a rather short jaunt there in your book, and we're here at the end of your book. So, a day in the life is the last little section to give some closure to Ms. Pat, and her practical applications to powerful interactions. So, we're in the last section. How do you feel about taking 10 minutes at the end of each day to think about the powerful interactions you had with the children? So, this might be a really good time to think about that. Maybe on your way home. um, if that's an option, if that's a time, most of us have to go from one thing to the next, but maybe 10 minutes in the car ride home, in a sense of, or maybe just even sitting in the parking lot for 10 minutes before you go, and maybe you just have a quick little book, you could have a quick little journal there in your car, in the front seat of your car, and just saying, oh yeah, that was a really good powerful interaction I had today. I really like the way that happened. Or another time where I just really didn't expect that learning. I can do more with that. Just a few minutes to think about interaction. It's something, every maybe a little different, but like I said, maybe a quick little journal in your car. Taking that time just at the end of the day, because I know when I get in my car now, of course I don't have young children right now. When I did, it might be a little different, but taking that 10 minutes just to think about what happened in your day with the children. You can see her notes are almost an interpretation of an anecdotal, so which is a good thing. So it's just kind of that interpretation of what she did, how things worked out, and so forth. If you can write it down, then you'd be incorporating best practices in your classroom. At least if you think about it, what step one. And like I said, if you've got some type of little journal, it might even be something that you have in your classroom at the end of the day, maybe up on the counter or something like that, or right by the door, and you know that, hey, I'm just going to swing by and do this each day on my way out. So some different techniques there. Okay, you do make a difference, because without you, there are no powerful interactions in a child's life in the classroom. There has to be somebody there to do the powerful interaction, to be part of that powerful interaction, and you're getting the ability, the skills, the training on this. Whereas maybe think about way back when you had just 12 units of child development. That's completely different than it is after you've completed most if not all of the program, and now you're working on those powerful interactions. Some of you don't have a lot of experience with young children in the classroom, so you're going to build on those powerful interactions over time, but hopefully you can also kind of see how some of the teachers create those powerful interactions and go, yeah, wow, that was kind of a really good one, and you can learn from that modeling. Powerful interactions take two things. Wait till you get to see this: energy and confidence. So energy, extremely important. It takes a lot of energy to be an by water right there for a second. Okay, but it does take that energy in order for all of those things to take place in your mind. And I'm sure that if you're feeling tired, and you're lacking some of that energy, powerful interactions are much more difficult to undertake. And the other thing is confidence. So, like I said, some of you who are new to the actual classroom situation. You haven't been in the field at all, or maybe for a very short time, you might not really feel that confidence there, but hopefully you will continue to build that over time. Energy, you need your energy to fuel being present, so you can decide how to connect and extend learning in more effective ways. So think about those things. This might be something to, your energy to fuel being present, so you can decide how to connect and extend learning in more effective ways. So there's different types of energy. There's physical energy. So there's mental energy, and there's emotional energy. Of course, creative energy. So let's talk about all of those types of energy. Physical energy, did you get a good night's sleep? Same thing kind of goes with mental, physical energy, do you have the stamina? Are you able to get up and down off the floor? Are you able to get up and down out of the chairs with the children and so forth? Do you have the physical energy to go up into the loft or the spaces, or to run around outside on the playground? Those are things that all take energy, and we know that we need to have that type of energy in order to be an effective teacher in an early childhood classroom. Mental, if you're tired, I know last week I had a couple nights where, oh my gosh, I got like 5 hours of sleep for, a couple nights in a row. And I could just feel it wearing on me by the end of the week of going, wow, it really takes every amount of effort and energy I have in order to be mentally there. So a good night's sleep. And for some of us, I was just doing too much work. But for some people, it's a difficult time getting to sleep and getting to bed. So emotional energy, some of those things can be very draining if we've got some emotional issues going on in our personal life. I always say, as you know, if you've been around me any point in time, that, to leave it at the gate. Leave it at the door. So if we have those things in our personal life that might take a toll on us emotionally, it's important to leave it outside the gate. But some things are just really tough. I know when after my father passed away, he passed away on a early Saturday morning, and I'm back at work on Monday. The funeral wasn't till the next Friday. But it was a tough emotional week, and I was teaching 5 classes at the time, 5 face-to-face classes, and at that point in time, there was points I told my students, I'm like, hey, if I just start crying here, I'm just letting you know what's going on. But having that emotional energy is extremely important, and hopefully it's on the real, it's really positive. There's so many great things about being a teacher of young children that make us so happy and so emotionally present with the children. And then of course creative. Oh my gosh, I love it when I can take that time to be creative, to create some activities, to create activity ideas, to think about things in new ways. And some teachers do a better job of that than others. There's some teachers that create incredible art activities, some teachers that create incredible science activities. They just get very creative in their room design and everything, and it's just like, oh, I just love seeing that. Oh wow, that's a really great idea, and taking charge from that. So getting energy, and sometimes we can get energy in these ways by doing workshops, by going to see different, maybe you're going to the Children's Museum and you get some of these creative ideas, and it gives you that energy by going to those spaces and going, wow, I could do that in my classroom. I could do that activity, and continues you going. Conferences, those types of things also can help rejuvenate your energy. Energizers to help, look for humor. Like I told some students at different points in time, there was a teacher at the lab school years ago, and she was one of those people, like every time you walked in her room, she just always had this great laugh, like And it wasn't like she was laughing at any children, but she was just laughing with them, and she was just enjoying them so much that she just really, she was just laughing all the time. And I mean, there are times in which, she definitely struggled and had difficult times emotionally, but she always looked for the humor in things, and she always, gave children hugs and smiled and laughed with them, just showing them that she really, really did care for them. So there's humor in almost everything. Remember, things that she's, for ice cream, she says ice cream. So that's how she pronounces it. And so, cake and ice cream is what she says. And of course, um, her dad does a little bit more of the, like, what do you want for your birthday? That kind of thing. And, but if you hear a child saying, ice cream for ice cream, you're going to make sure that you're not laughing about that and not feeding into that in the way in which this father is, and the mother's trying to stop it. Because I don't know where she goes to childcare and not and such. I believe she goes to a family childcare home somewhere here in the county. I'm not too sure exactly where, but that's something that you don't want to laugh at, right? So we want to look for humor in those things that children do and they say, but in a harmless way. Set the priorities. So what are your priorities? And sometimes you have to say no. So, I know when my son was little and he was young, and I was teaching full time, and he was going to lab school a couple days and so forth. When it came to different meetings, um, I know that I used to go on walks at my lunch break, and that would be something that would help energize me. So and maybe going on walks with different people. I know sometimes some of our teachers do those kinds of things, so create that energy exchange, and making energizers part of your daily routine. So what is something that can help you get going, um, and maybe it's talking to somebody, maybe it's doing something special, maybe it's making that one little creative thing to 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 energize you in your day. All right, and confidence. It takes confidence to turn everyday interactions into powerful interactions. Everybody's going to be a little different with the confidence part of it, but being confident takes time to trust yourself and make a decision on how to connect with a child. And are you going to be perfect every time? No, you're not. Okay, you're not going to be perfect, so don't think about being perfect because none of us are perfect. Okay, and you're like, oh, I mean, just the other day I was reading to a group of children. I'm like, oh, I could have done it that way. Oh, I could have said it that way. I could have done it this way. I mean, so we're not going to be perfect, so trust yourself to make the decision how to connect. Reflecting on what you do or did helps build your confidence. So we just talked about that at the beginning, right? Take that 10 minutes every day to go, how did that work? Reflecting on what I did is going to be a big part of that in helping build your confidence. Some ideas to help you refine your practice. Keep a journal, which I already gave you some examples of. Talk with colleagues in positive ways and going, I've got this issue in my classroom, or I've got this activity, or I can't think of something to do with this, or I need to introduce this topic, or what about some literacy ideas, whatever it might be. They might be able to help you out. Use videotape. So you guys are getting videotape this semester. So next time when you watch it here for your final, pay attention to some of the small details and see how you do create those powerful interactions. I know it's not always easy to hear yourself on the video for those powerful interactions, or during those powerful interactions when I'm videotaping you, because sometimes you're across the room and I'm not. I'm on the other side. But pay attention to some of those small details. Again, it doesn't get the whole atmosphere of the room when you're using a videotape, but you remember what it was like in there. So that's something that can help out. Work with a partner. If you have an assistant or an aide in your classroom, work with that person and, hey, how did that happen? Or how did this go? Give them feedback, and also, hopefully they can give you feedback. Join with colleagues in a professional learning community, something like the NAEYC, which I know has got some specials going on right now for students. I'm going to be, sharing that. You can always go onto the website, but they've got just a couple stories and from there. All right, so last but not least, I am going to take you to that website. And you can see right here, powerful interactions is something that powerful interactions, you are your best own resources. So you can go here to the blog. I'm under the blog right now, but there's different sections about powerful interactions. I really like their homepage. Be present, pause, quiet your static, decide, connect, observe, approach, tap into trust, which we just talked about, observing and observation in chapter 4 as well, and extend, model, stretch, and learn. So it's got some really great resources here that you can tap into to make a little bit more of your interactions powerful, and to go beyond just what the textbook is talking about. So I think that's it for today. Have a great rest of your day.